Black, MP slapped in court. Seconds later, she drops him cold. The first thing people saw when they walked into New Hope Baptist these days wasn't the cross. It was her. The mural stretched across the back wall of the fellowship hall, sprayed right over peeling cream paint and old water stains. A black woman in a white suit, jaw set, eyes blazing, fist frozen inches from the face of a towering white cop. No impact, no blood, no aftermath. Just that moment, hanging there like a held breath. Danielle King walked beneath her own painted knuckles, heels ticking softly against the scuffed linoleum. In the mural, she looked 10 feet tall. In real life, she just looked tired, heads turned as she passed. Deaconesses in flowered dresses, grandfathers in 2 big suits, women with silver hair wrapped in church scarves. Pride flickered in their eyes. All but something else, too. Worry. Like they were looking at a storm that had already passed once and might come back any minute. In the corner, an old television sat on a metal cart, its volume turned low. A news anchor's smooth voice drifted through the room. Former Atlanta police officer Derek the Bull Sterling remains in state custody, serving his sentence at Red River Correctional Facility. Sources say he has been moved to protective housing after an incident with other inmates. A grainy booking photo flashed on the screen. Sterling's face was swollen, nose crooked, one eye purpled and half shut. The caption underneath read simply, "Sterling, inmate. He's not the bull anymore," somebody muttered near the coffee urn. Danielle's fingers went almost automatically to the faint line on her cheek. Under certain light, you could barely see it, a thin pale crescent trailing toward her ear, under the fluorescent buzz of the fellowship hall. Yet it might as well have been neon. Her jaw tightened, then loosened. She dropped her hand. "Baby." The voice came from a folding chair near the TV. Miss Gloria Jenkins, 80 if she was a day, sat there in her Sunday best, stockings wrinkled at the ankles, cane leaning against her knee. She'd marched in the 60s, got hosed on Auburn Avenue, buried a son who never made it back from a traffic stop. Danielle stepped closer. "Yes, ma'am." Gloria's eyes were sharp and wet all at once. She reached out, wrapped Danielle's wrist in a papery hand. "Tell me the truth," Gloria said quietly. "You ever wish you'd just kept your head down that day? Let him talk crazy, let him put his hands on you, and just swallowed it like the rest of us had to?" Conversation around them hummed, spoons clinked in styrofoam cups. A child laughed somewhere near the kitchen. It all felt very far away. Danielle did not answer. Her throat worked around a word that never came. Instead, and she turned toward the big front windows. Outside, the Georgia sun was throwing heat off the cracked sidewalk. On the corner, a group of young black men had dragged an old heavy bag from somewhere and hung it off a rusted street sign. Their shirts were off, shoulders slick with sweat, knuckles wrapped in tape. One boy called the rhythm, the others hit in time, fists thudding into canvas. Breathe, step, turn, hit. Every punch sounded like a small, stubborn refusal. Gloria watched Danielle watching them. "We paid a price for you to stand up in that courtroom," she said. "Just remember, you ain't the only one who had skin in that fight." Danielle swallowed. Her reflection in the glass looked like a ghost laid over the boys outside. Suit and curls and that nearly invisible scar. Before the slap, they called her Representative King. After, it was other names. Hero, menace, that woman. A symbol, whether she wanted to be or not. And the anchor on the TV shifted to another story. Someone muted the sound. The room moved on, but the weight did not. Before the sound of that hand cracked through courtroom 7C, before the country argued over whether she was a thug or a champion, Danielle King believed something simple. If you followed the rules, if you stayed calm, if you did everything right, the system would hold. Then a badge backhanded her across the face, and the world flipped upside down. The church basement was hotter than the Georgia summer outside. Folding chairs squeaked against the tile. Fans waved in slow circles, and somebody's grandbaby kept knocking a plastic truck against the wall. Danielle stood in front of a whiteboard with a flowchart about police oversight half erased behind her. She had her sleeves rolled to the elbows, blazer hanging off the back of a chair, microphone in one hand, and a stack of complaint forms in the other. "That is why," she said, as pointing at the chart, "we pushed for body cams on every officer in this city. If they put their hands on you, if they talk crazy to you, we will have it on tape. We file, we sue, we change policy." An older man in the second row raised his hand, a slow, deliberate motion. He wore a Braves cap and a shirt with his name stitched over the pocket. Willie, according to the tag, but everybody called him Pops. Danielle nodded. Yes, sir. Pops did not bother getting up. His voice carried anyway. What happens, he asked, when they do not care that you did everything right? When you say yes, sir, and no, sir. When you are polite, you keep your hands where they can see them, and they still slam your face into the concrete. What then, baby? The room went quiet. Even the plastic truck stopped banging. Danielle felt the weight of the question settle on her shoulders. She thought of the files on her desk, the autopsy photos she wished she could forget. She lifted her chin. Then, she said slowly, Wes, we make sure the slam is on camera. We make sure there is a record. We get you a lawyer who is not scared to take on the department. We go to court. We put it in front of a jury. You might not trust them yet, but trust me. With video, with the right case, we can win. We have won. Gloria Jenkins, sitting near the back, gave a small snort that might have been a laugh or a warning. Danielle heard it but kept going. I am not telling you the system is perfect, she added. I am telling you it is a machine. And machines can be forced to move if enough of us push in the same direction. There were murmurs, a few nods, a few skeptical hums. Pops looked at her for a long moment, then sat back, folding arms across his chest like he was tucking the question away for later. Hours later, the chart on the board was a mess of arrows and coffee stains, and someone's kid had drawn a smiley face in the corner. The hall was empty. Danielle's office above it was not. Stacks of folders towered over her desk, names written in thick black marker along the spines, men in orange jumpsuits in the attached photos, a boy on a slab. The clock on the wall said 2 in the morning. Danielle's face rested sideways on a pile of reports, cheek pressed against the staples. A highlighter had bled neon yellow across a paragraph about non-lethal restraint techniques. Her phone buzzed under a file. She jerked awake, wiped a line of drool from the paper, and squinted at the screen. Sam Cross, she answered. Please tell me you are calling to say we finally got the use of force report in the Carter case. I am calling to say they sent us a 6-page document that says absolutely nothing, Sam said. His voice was dry and exhausted. Also, hi, nice to hear your voice. Danielle leaned back, rubbing her temples. Let me guess, they lost the body cam footage. Magically, on the one day every officer on that scene had their cameras on. Whole server went down. How did they say? She closed her eyes. Of course it did. You sound tired, Sam said. She could hear him shuffling papers, knocking over something on his end. And before you start giving me the "we will fix it from the inside" speech, remember this. They wrote the manual, Danielle. The system protects itself first. I am not naive, Sam. You are optimistic. That is more dangerous. She opened her eyes, staring at the ceiling tiles. I still believe if we build the right case, if we follow the process, we can punch a hole straight through that manual. He was quiet for a second. You know what your problem is? He said finally. Enlighten me. You are still playing by rules that were never written for people who look like you. Danielle let out a breath that was almost a laugh, almost a sigh. And yet, she said, here we are. You, the messy white civil rights lawyer who owes me 3 callback interviews. Me, and the black state rep with a folding chair upstairs and the trust of people like Pops downstairs. If we do not play, who is left? He did not argue with that. They both knew the answer. The next afternoon, she drove out to an industrial park near the airport. Delivery trucks rolled in and out. Heat shimmered over the blacktop. Malik's beat-up white van sat crooked near the back. He stepped out when he saw her, wiping his hands on his shorts. He was in his mid-30s, leaner than she remembered from his worst days, eyes clearer. A small chip on his tooth from a fight years ago only showed when he smiled for real. Look at you, he said, grinning. Madam Representative pulling up on us little working folk. She hugged him tighter than the joke deserved. You eating? She asked. When I remember. I mean real food, Malik, not gas station chips. He shrugged. It is honest work. Keeps my mind off stupid. She pulled back, studying his face. You staying away from stupid too? His smile flickered. I am trying. Cops still know my name though. They pull me over just to say hi. You know how it is. Her jaw hardened. If anybody so much as breathes wrong on you, you call me. You understand? I cannot handle another file with our last name on it. I will burn down that courthouse before I let them write you into one of these reports." He laughed, but there was a tremor under it. "You are talking like one of your speeches now." "I am serious, Malik." He held up his hands. "All right, chill. I am good. You go fix the world. I will just try not to make headlines." He turned to go back to his van, then paused. "You really think all this policy stuff is going to change anything?" he asked over his shoulder. "People like Sterling still out there. He comes on the news. They call him a hero." The name sat between them for a second like something sour. "We will make sure when someone like him steps out of line, there is a record," Danielle said. I believe in receipts." In the end, receipts talk. He shook his head, half amused, half skeptical. "Just be careful, sis. These folks do not care about your title when they mad. To them, you are just another black face with a microphone." Later that week, Danielle sat in the tiny bathroom off her office, blazer back on, makeup bag open on the sink. Fluorescent light hummed overhead. She stared at herself in the mirror. On the TV in the outer office, someone was replaying footage from a protest 3 months old. A black woman screaming in a cop's face, voice looped out of context. The chyron at the bottom read, "Rage in Atlanta." Danielle turned the volume down until it was barely a whisper. She watched the woman on the screen for another moment, then looked back at her own reflection. She practiced a small, controlled smile. The kind that said calm, composed, not angry, not hysterical. She lifted her chin, lowered it, tried again. And her biggest fear was not a bullet. It was a frame grab. One bad angle, one pause on her mid-sentence, with her eyes wide and her mouth open. And that would be the clip they played on loop while talking about another angry black politician losing it. She pressed her palms flat on the sink. "You are not going to be that clip," she told herself quietly. "You are going to be the one they cut to when they say, 'Here is someone who kept her cool.'" A knock on the doorframe made her jump. Her aide, Janelle, stood there with a stack of folders. "Sorry, Judge Holloway's clerk just called. There is a civil suit against Atlanta PD on the docket next week. Family from Vine City. They filed over a beating in a traffic stop. Want to know if you are still planning to sit in?" "Yeah," Danielle said, already reaching for her blazer. "I want to see how Holloway handles it." Janelle lifted an eyebrow. That is the one with Sterling listed as a witness, right?" "Exactly." Janelle hesitated. "You sure you want to be in that room? You have been pushing him hard in committee. Word is the old man is not your biggest fan." Danielle slipped on her jacket, adjusted the lapels. "It is a public courtroom," she said, "and I am a public servant. In there, they cannot pull anything. Cameras everywhere, transcripts. It is a courthouse, for God's sake." Gloria's voice floated up from some memory. "With some people, we will always just be black folks talking too loud." Danielle pushed the thought aside. The following Monday, she walked up the wide stone steps of the Fulton County Courthouse. The building loomed against a clear blue sky. All columns and carved names, heavy with history and the ghosts of 1,000 rulings. Inside, the air conditioning hit her like a wall. A line of people snaked toward the security checkpoint. All belts coming off, phones in plastic trays, children clutching their mother's hands. She placed her bag on the conveyor belt, stepped through the metal detector. It beeped loud and sharp. For a split second, as the red light flashed over her chest, her heart kicked hard against her ribs. "Back up and try again, ma'am," the deputy drawled, bored. He waved her through once more. This time, the light stayed green. Danielle picked up her bag, straightened her shoulders, and walked toward courtroom 7C, believing that inside those walls, the rules would still mean something. Courtroom 7C breathed like a living thing. Even on recess, it never went all the way quiet. Heels clicked across the marble. Papers whispered as lawyers shuffled them into neat stacks. The vending machine in the hallway coughed out another plastic bottle of soda. Somewhere near the back, a cappuccino machine whined, steam hissing. 2 reporters in cheap suits sat on the back bench and arguing in low voices about what headline would get more clicks. "Cop called to the stand is a folk hero," one of them said, tapping his phone. "We frame it like this brave officer is being smeared." Or, the other countered, "We lean into the state rep angle. Firebrand black lawmaker takes on APD. People love conflict." Danielle tuned them out. She sat 3 rows up from the rail, yellow legal pad in her lap, pen moving in tight, neat strokes. The plaintiff's mother sat in the front row, a short black woman in a cardigan 2 sizes too big, her hands wrapped around a framed 8x10 of a boy in a graduation cap. Every few minutes, Danielle's eyes drifted from her notes to that photo, to the boy's grin, to the way his mother's thumb traced the glass like she was trying to memorize the shape of his face all over again. Recess, Judge Holloway had barked earlier, already halfway off the bench. 10 minutes. The room had exhaled. Lawyers dispersed. Jurors herded out to their box. Bailiffs posted themselves by the doors. And most people stretched, checked their phones, buzzed with small talk. Danielle stayed seated for a moment, listening. Behind her, a low rumble of laughter rolled from the side of the room where a line of uniformed officers had been standing all morning. At the center of them, like a planet with its own orbit, was Derek the Bull, Sterling. She had clocked him the second she walked in. The bulk of him, the squared-off jaw, the smirk he wore like cologne. She had seen his name on incident reports and lawsuits for years. Today was the first time she had seen him in person. "Representative King," one of the reporters called softly. "Quick quote before we go back in, just a sentence about accountability." "Recess," a bailiff snapped. "No interviews in here." Danielle rose anyway, sliding her phone into her hand. "I'll step out into the hall," she murmured, more to herself than anyone. Fresh air, a moment to reset. Text Sam, check on Malik. And she moved toward the aisle, bag over her shoulder, legal pad pressed to her chest. Sterling peeled away from his cluster of uniforms, like he had been waiting on that exact moment. He stepped into the narrow space between her row and the exit, planting himself there. He was close enough that she could see the tiny white scar on his chin, the coffee stain on his tie. He chewed gum with slow, open-mouthed boredom. "Gallery is closed, ma'am," he said, voice pitched just loud enough to carry. "Sit back down. Don't cause trouble." Danielle stopped short. She felt rather than saw heads turn. "It is representative," she corrected, keeping her tone cool, professional. "And I am stepping into the hallway to take a call. You are blocking the aisle, Officer Sterling. Step aside, please." His eyes flicked down to the badge clipped to her belt. State of Georgia, then back up to her face. "Out there," he said, jerking his chin toward the doors. "You can play important. In here, your little title don't mean nothing. I am the law in this room." His breath smelled like burned coffee and mint. His body soaked up the space between her and the exit. Across the aisle, one of the reporters tilted his phone ever so slightly, angling the camera, like he might catch something worth posting. A bailiff glanced over, then away, deciding he hadn't seen anything yet. Danielle felt a heat crawl up her neck. She kept her voice level. "I know how recess works, officer. The judge called it. I am leaving my seat. You will take your hand off this aisle, let me pass, and we are going to pretend this little moment never happened." He smiled. It was slow and mean. "See, that sounds like you telling me what to do. And I don't take orders from angry politicians trying to make a name off my back." His hand shot out and wrapped around her upper arm. The pressure was immediate, fingers digging in, and thumb pressing against the inside of her bicep. He didn't yank, not yet. He just held like he was testing how much resistance she had in her. Pain shot up toward her shoulder. She bit down on the inside of her cheek. "Let go," she said quietly. He leaned in closer, bringing his face near enough that she could count the burst blood vessels in his eyes. "Tell you what," he murmured. "You go sit back down like a good little rep. Don't get in the way of the process. And maybe next time we run into each other, I remember you know your place." In the back of her mind, Gloria's voice rose up, as clear as if the old woman were standing right behind her. "With some folks, we will always just be some black people talking too loud." Danielle's pulse hammered in her ears. A layer under the fear, under the anger, there was something colder, a calculation. She saw not just herself, but every face that would see this moment later if she swallowed it, if she laughed it off, and if she filed a complaint in triplicate and let it disappear into some internal affairs drawer. What would that teach them? That even a black woman with an office and a title and her name on a bill had to let men like him put hands on her in a courtroom with cameras and reporters watching. If they saw that, what hope did Pops have at a traffic stop on the south side? What hope did Malik have in a dark parking lot at 2 a.m.? Sterling tightened his grip. She felt something pop under his fingers, a bright spark of pain. A few pews away, the plaintiff's mother watched, eyes wide. One hand clutched the frame of her son's picture. The other rose halfway from her lap, then froze, unsure. Danielle's voice came out louder than she expected, carrying to the far corners of the room. "Take your hand off me, officer, right now!" The words sliced through the leftover courtroom murmur. Conversation died. Paper stopped rustling. The vending machine hummed on in the hallway. Oblivious. 30 heads turned. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Sterling's face flushed, then darkened. He had her by the arm in front of half the room, and she had just called him out like a rookie caught stealing evidence. "There a problem here, ma'am?" A bailiff asked carefully from his position by the door. He did not come closer. Sterling's jaw clenched. He let go of her arm, but only to step closer, chest almost touching her notebook. "You done?" he asked, voice low and dangerous. "You get your little moment?" Danielle could feel her arm throbbing. She straightened her spine anyway, forced her shoulders down. "I am walking out to make a phone call," she said. "If you touch me again, I will report this as assault. On the record, in committee, on the floor of the House. Do you understand me?" A ripple went through the officers behind Sterling. There it was. She had said it out loud. Yeah, not just "you hurt me." She had threatened the only thing they treated like sacred, their power. His eyes narrowed. "In here," he repeated louder now, so everyone could hear. "You don't tell me what assault is. In here, I decide what happens. You think those cameras are going to save you?" She heard the words like a slap before the real one ever landed. "You think those cameras are going to save you?" Her whole career, she had said exactly that to people like Pops and Gloria. "Trust the evidence. Trust the process. We will force the machine to move." Sterling's hand came up. She did not see the full arc. Later on grainy clips and replayed angles, she would finally catch the shape of it. In real time, all she registered was the shift of his shoulder, the way his eyes went almost flat. Then sound. A sharp, ugly crack, like a bat hitting wet wood, split the air. The overhead lights seemed to flicker. Her head snapped sideways, the world leaping to follow. And for a split second, she tasted metal, hot and sudden at the back of her tongue. Someone gasped. Someone cursed under their breath. A chair scraped hard against the floor. The plaintiff's mother let out a choked little cry. One of the reporters whispered, "Oh my God." His phone frozen halfway up, recording or not. Danielle couldn't tell. She swayed. The rational part of her brain registered the ache blossoming along her cheek, the way her vision fuzzed at the edges. Another part stayed ice clear. Sterling had already rolled his shoulders back, chest puffed, waiting. For the tears, for the wobble in her knees, for the look of hurt pride he could twist on a stand into emotionally unstable, for the black woman in a white suit to crumple like tissue to make his story easy. Danielle pulled breath into her lungs. The hum of the fluorescent lights rushed back. She blinked and the room snapped into focus. Across the aisle, the reporters stared at her, mouths open. One of them finally remembered to hit record. In the second before anyone else moved, she saw a montage, rapid fire behind her eyes. The boy in the graduation photo, Pops's lined face in the church basement, Malik hands shoved into his pockets saying, "To them, you are just another black face with a microphone." Gloria's question, "What then, baby?" If she bowed her head now, pretended this was not what it was, if she sat down and let the machine grind on, this slap would not just be hers. It would belong to every person in that gallery, every person in her district. It would tell them the same old story in a new suit, do everything right, and it still does not matter. Heat flushed through her, then cooled into something like steel. And in that split second between humiliation and fear, Danielle made a choice, not about her fist, but about who she refused to be ever again. For a heartbeat after the crack, the courtroom just hung there, stunned. And then everything hit at once. Sterling lay sprawled on the floor, eyes closed, one arm twisted under him like a broken doll. Whether he was out cold or playing dead, Danielle couldn't tell. She only knew her cheek was burning. Her lungs were dragging in air like she'd just run a mile, and 50 people were staring at her like they'd never seen her before. "Bailiffs!" Judge Holloway roared from the bench, face flushing dark red. "Contempt! Arrest her!" Two deputies slammed into her from behind, driving her forward over the defense table. Her palms skidded on polished wood. "Stop resisting!" One of them yelled into her ear. "I'm not resisting," she gasped, arms wrenched back anyway, metal biting into her wrists. Somewhere behind her, someone was sobbing. Someone else was whispering, "She hit him! She hit him!" Holloway's gaze wasn't on the red print of Sterling's hand on her face. It was on Sterling's body on the ground, and on the fact she was still standing. By evening, the machine was already humming. The Atlanta PD press release called Sterling a decorated officer with an exemplary record, and Danielle an aggressive subject who became unstable and attempted to rush the bench. On cable news, the Chiron read, "Black lawmaker loses it in court, attacks cop." The clip they looped started with her moving forward, never with the slap. In the holding cell, concrete sweating under bad fluorescent light, Danielle sat on a thin bench and tried to slow her breathing. "Yeah, she finally showed her real self," one guard snickered outside. "These people always snap sooner or later." A younger black officer glanced in at her, jaw tight. For a second, she thought he might say something. He didn't. He turned away, joining the laughter down the hall. The label settled on her shoulders like a wet coat. Cop attacker. Across town, Malik watched the footage on a mounted TV in the warehouse break room. The box in his hands hit the floor with a thud. "That's my sister," he choked out. "Pick it up or clock out," his supervisor snapped. Malik did, hands shaking, eyes still on the screen where Danielle's name crawled under the word meltdown. In Gloria's living room, the TV painted the walls blue and white. The commentator said, "Lost control" and "rage." Gloria reached for the remote, thumb trembling, and shut it off. The sudden quiet was heavier than the noise. The next day, Sam Cross sat across from Danielle in a sour-smelling interview room, metal table bolted to the floor. "They're going to try to bury you under the jail," he said, folding his hands. "But if you're telling me he hit you first, we fight. All the way." "There were cameras," Danielle said hoarsely. "People saw. The truth will come out, right?" Sam looked down at the table, studying a rust spot like it was a legal brief. "Yeah," he said finally. "You're not quite meeting her eyes." "We'll see." That night, a guard slid the small hatch on her cell door open. "Judge denied bond," he said, almost cheerful. "Says you're a danger to public order. You're staying with us." The mattress was thin, the blanket thinner. Danielle lay on her back, staring at the hairline crack in the ceiling as a baton wrapped playfully along the bars down the row. "Sleep tight, cop hitter," a voice sang. For the first time since the slap, fear pushed harder than the sting on her cheek. Not just fear of jail, fear that everything she'd believed about cameras, courts, and truth had just shattered in a single day. The ankle monitor itched worse than any wound on Danielle's face. It sat like a plastic shackle above her left shoe, blinking a soft green when she walked from her bedroom to the kitchen. Every time it chirped, she was reminded that yes, she was out of jail, but no, she was not free. Her lawyer had called it a win. Conditional release. Home confinement from 7 in the evening to 7 in the morning. Surrendered passport. No contact with the press about the case. No committee hearings until further notice. By the end of the week, her nameplate in the Judiciary Committee room was gone. Her colleagues at the State House called it temporary, just until the controversy died down. The opposition went on TV and demanded more. "We cannot have someone under felony indictment sitting on a justice committee," one opponent said into a cluster of microphones. "Representative King should step aside for the good of this institution." In her own district, people were split. At the grocery store on Ralph David Abernathy, a woman squeezed her hand, whispering, "We know what they did to you. We got you." Then checked over her shoulder like she was afraid someone saw. 2 aisles over, a man she had known since high school shook his head at her as he passed. "You should have just walked away," he muttered. Now you got all of us looking crazy." On cable news, the smear campaign hit a new gear. The edited courtroom clip bounced around every channel. It started with Danielle stepping into Sterling, fist rising. It cut off before his hand ever touched her. "So much for peaceful reform," a smug host joked on a conservative talk show. "This is what happens when you elect activists instead of serious leaders. They end up swinging." Captain Bill O'Reilly, the police union rep, sat on another network in full dress uniform talking about Sterling like he was a wounded soldier. "Officer Sterling has given 15 years to this city," he said, "decorated, commended, and now he is fighting for his life because a politician decided to make a scene. The state rep says he acted first." The anchor pushed. O'Reilly smirked. "People can say anything when they are trying to stay out of prison. I prefer to look at the tape." The tape he meant was the one that made her look like a monster. At Malik's little rental on the south side, that same clip played on a loop while he sat on the edge of his couch, elbows on his knees. He killed the sound, but he could not kill the sight of his big sister's fist frozen in midair. He had bigger problems. In the 2 weeks since she came home, he had been pulled over 4 times. Random check, the officers had said each time, leaning into his window, flashlights sweeping over his dash, his lap, his face. One night he came in late, shirt damp with sweat, shaking too hard to get the key into the lock. Danielle was inside waiting, ankle monitor blinking in the dark. "What happened?" she demanded, rising from the couch. He shut the door, leaned against it, breathing like he had been chased. "They stopped me again," he said. "Same 3. They asked how it felt to have a celebrity for a sister. They asked if I had anything I wanted to confess before the next time they checked me." Her stomach dropped. Malik, they said," he went on, voice climbing, "if you do not take the deal when it comes, they are going to start digging around in my old stuff. They mentioned my case from back in the day, the one we are not supposed to talk about. They knew dates, Dan. They knew numbers. They knew too much." He laughed, but it cracked in the middle. "I am trying so hard to stay straight, and they look at me like I'm already back on the corner." Guilt hit her like a body blow. She reached for him. "I am not letting them touch you," she said. "Do you hear me? I will not let them turn you into leverage." "Yeah," he said, pulling away. "And how you going to stop them? With another speech?" She had no answer. In a cramped office downtown, Sam Cross stood at a copier, banging the side of it like physical violence might make it behave. Across the desk, Tyler Finch sat hunched over his phone, 22, fresh out of law school. And he still had the kind of earnest face that made clients either trust him or underestimate him completely. Now that face was lit by the glow of a 4-second video clip. He hit play again. The frame was shaky, low angle from behind a row of seats, but it was crystal clear where it mattered. Sterling's hand drawing back, the flash of impact on Danielle's cheek, her head snapping aside, the crack of sound. In the background, someone whispered, "Jesus." Tyler's thumb hovered over the screen. He had been sitting in 7C that day, taking notes for Sam, phone in his hand, because he had been recording the judge's jury instructions on audio. When things started to go sideways, he had lifted it just enough to get that shot before instinct dropped him down behind the bench. He had gone home that night and almost deleted it. Almost. Instead, he had saved it to a hidden folder and spent every day since staring at that folder name like it was a live grenade. If he showed it, the whole narrative changed. If he showed it, well, he would be the one who crossed the line. Cops had long memories. Prosecutors did too. He wanted to be a lawyer in this town. He wanted to survive. He opened an email draft addressed to Sarah O'Neill, the investigative reporter whose work he had followed through law school. "I have something you need to see," he typed. He attached the video. His finger hovered over send. Then he swore under his breath, deleted the attachment, and closed the laptop so hard the screen rattled. Across town, in a coffee shop that smelled like burnt beans and printer ink, Sarah O'Neill slid a file across a small table toward Sam. The folder was thick, stuffed with photocopies and handwritten notes. "What is this?" Sam asked, flipping it open. "Derek Sterling's real resume," Sarah said. "Internal complaints, settlements, cases that got dropped when witnesses changed their minds. Funny thing, the day after they filed, they all got visits from people who sounded a lot like him or his buddies." Sam skimmed pages. And an old woman's shoulder dislocated during a traffic stop, a bartender with a broken jaw, a teenager who swore a knife was planted in his backpack. "Why has no one seen this?" he asked. "Because the department buries it," Sarah said, "and because judges like Holloway rule that prior bad acts are too prejudicial for juries to hear. They call it character assassination when it is truth. So we cannot use this." "Not directly," she said, "but you and I both know his ego. Get him on that stand. Let him brag about what a model copy is. Make him say the words spotless record, and you might pry that door open an inch." Sam closed the file, jaw working. "Ghost file," he said quietly. "What?" "That is what this is. The record they tried to kill. Might be exactly what we need to haunt him with." 2 days later, Danielle sat in a conference room at the DA's office, the ankle monitor itching under the cuff of her pants. Across the table, the assistant district attorney shuffled papers. Captain O'Reilly lounged in the corner, arms crossed, smirk in place. Representative King, the ADA began, using the title like it tasted wrong. We are prepared to offer a plea. Sam's leg bounced under the table. Danielle forced herself to stay still. You plead guilty to aggravated assault on a peace officer, the ADA said. We recommend 3 to 5 years, nonviolent offender facility. You keep your pension. This does not have to ruin the rest of your life. And in return, Danielle asked, you get to avoid putting your star witness on the stand under real cross-examination. The ADA's expression did not change. In return, he said, we stop digging. The department stops pulling your brother over. Old files stay where they are instead of all on my desk. Danielle's blood ran cold. You leave Malik out of this, she snapped. Then take the deal, Captain O'Reilly cut in. It is a simple equation. Ma'am, you swing on a cop in a courtroom, there is a price. We are giving you a chance to set the terms. Sam squeezed her arm under the table. We can win this, he murmured. If we get the right evidence in, if the truth comes out, we can win. She thought of cameras that supposedly died the day she needed them, of a press that had already decided what clip they wanted to replay, of Malik shaking in their doorway, saying they knew too much about his past. That night, back at her kitchen table, she pulled out a file she had buried in the back of a cabinet. Malik King, possession with intent, mugshot from another lifetime, eyes wild, skin sallow. She laid her hand on the paper. It trembled. What is the point of being right? She whispered into the empty room. If my brother ends up dead because of it. Tyler Finch did not sleep the night before jury selection. He lay on his back in his studio apartment, watching headlights crawl across the ceiling. In the glow of his laptop screen pulsing from the desk, every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same 4 seconds. Sterling's shoulder turning, Danielle's head snapping sideways. That sickening crack. At 3 in the morning, he rolled out of bed, opened the laptop, and pulled up the hidden folder again. His cursor hovered over the file. You're a coward, he told his own reflection in the dark window. He opened an encrypted browser, logged into a burner account he'd built and never used, and dragged the clip into an upload box. Then he hesitated, hand shaking. If he sent this, he was putting a target on his back. If he didn't, he was leaving Danielle there alone. He thought of his dad, who had taught him to drive in a Walmart parking lot, and said quietly that when a cop pulled him over, the rules were different for Tyler than for the kids he grew up with. Because of his skin, because of theirs. Tyler hit send. The video went out into the dark. By mid-morning, Sarah O'Neill had it in her inbox twice. From 2 different anonymous accounts. She watched it once at her desk in the newsroom, hand over her mouth, then again with the sound up. The slap was louder than she expected, even through cheap laptop speakers. She didn't wait to pitch it. She tweeted it with one line. Here's the part of the tape they keep cutting out. It took the internet an hour to find it, 2 to clip it, 4 to name it. By evening, hashtags like She Hit Back and Stand with Danielle were trending. Folks who had been calling her a thug the week before were posting things like, she only did what any of us would have told our daughters to do. And, if that was my mama, I'd want her to drop him too. On local radio, an older black caller choked up as he spoke. I was there when they beat us on Auburn, he said. We didn't have cameras. If we did, maybe some of us would still be here. That officer hit her first. I ain't mad she finished it. But the charges didn't vanish. And the DA's office didn't tweet an apology. The indictment still sat on paper, cold and official. Viral didn't equal dismissed. In a cramped conference room at the courthouse, Sam tossed a stapled packet onto the table between them. That is their discovery, he said. Nothing about Sykes. Nothing about any malfunction. They're sticking to the story that the CCTV just happened to die. Danielle flipped through the pages, bile rising. So the cameras just turn into pumpkins when a cop messes up? She asked. Depends who's in front of them, Sam said. But we might have a crack to slip through. I found somebody. His somebody was Gary Sykes, the courthouse IT guy whose name no one knew and everyone needed when printers died. Sam cornered him in a windowless server room that smelled like dust and burnt ozone. Look, Sykes whispered, glancing at the door. I don't like drama. I like clean code and working cameras. And I don't like being told to erase things that shouldn't be erased. So it's not gone, Sam said. Sykes tapped a metal rack. Nothing's ever really gone. Not if you know where to look. 2 days and 1 subpoena later, he walked into court hugging a hard drive like it was a newborn. The trial moved to a bigger courtroom with more pews and more cameras. The state framed it as necessary transparency. Everyone else knew it was for the show. Sterling made his entrance like he was walking a red carpet, dress uniform, medals gleaming. A stiff foam neck brace hugged his throat, and he moved with an exaggerated limp. On the stand, he painted himself as the reasonable man in a room full of chaos. She was yelling about her rights, he said, voice hoarse but earnest. I put my hand up to de-escalate. Next thing I know, I wake up on the floor. I would never lay hands on a woman. My record is spotless. Up at the defense table, Sam's pen rolled off his pad. He bent to pick it up, tie askew. And playing the bumbling public defender act so well, even Danielle almost believed it. When he stood to cross-examine, the slouch dropped from his shoulders. Spotless, Sam repeated. That's what you said? Yes, sir, Sterling answered. 15 years, not a single sustained complaint. Sam nodded, flipping open a thin black notebook Sarah had given him. You know, it's funny, because according to this, you've been busy. He read, name after name, date after date. An old lady whose shoulder dislocated itself when you helped her out of the car. A bartender whose jaw just broke when he tripped. A kid arrested with a knife that wasn't on him until after you patted him down. Graves, the prosecutor, leaped to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Prejudicial. This is character assassination. Counsel's own witness opened the door. Sam shot back. He claimed a spotless record. I'm simply checking for dirt. Holloway glared down from the bench. He wanted to shut it down. Danielle could see it in his eyes. But the cameras were rolling. The internet had already seen too much. Overruled, he said tightly. Proceed, but tread carefully. Sam smiled without warmth. One more question, officer. If your record is so clean, you won't mind if the jury sees what really happened that day. He lifted the hard drive. We have the full feed from camera 7, thanks to Mr. Sykes, who apparently knows his job better than whoever ordered him to pretend this didn't exist. When the video played on the screens, the room leaned forward as one. From above, everything looked smaller. The benches, the door. Danielle could see herself in white, moving down the aisle. She could see Sterling step in, block her path, grab her arm. She watched herself for the first time from outside her own body. The slap was worse from that angle. His arm drew back, full weight behind it. The crack echoed off the courtroom walls, even in silence. In the back corner of the frame, after she hit him, after she stood there shaking and the bailiffs swarmed her, the camera caught something else. Sterling's eyes fluttered open while he was unconscious. A fellow officer knelt beside him. They exchanged a few quick words. Then Sterling shut his eyes again, going limp just as the paramedics rushed in. A performance preserved in high definition. Danielle felt something cold settle in her chest. All those months she had blamed herself for losing her temper in a sacred space, and there it was on the screen. The trap, the first blow, the lie on the floor. It wasn't just that the process had failed her. It was that the process belonged to them. The cameras, the records, the narrative. All of it sat behind doors controlled by the same hands that had hit her. The only reason any of this was in the open now was because a nervous kid with a phone and an IT guy with a spine had decided they'd had enough. Fear doesn't just silence victims, she thought. It chokes witnesses, clerks, lawyers, anyone who's afraid of what happens if they tell the truth. At the next recess, Sam's phone vibrated nonstop. One call made him go pale. He pulled Danielle into a side conference room, shut the door, and pressed his back against it like he could hold bad news out. That was the DA, he said. They're not rolling over. She exhaled, bitter. Of course they're not. What's the new spin? They found something, he said. In Malik's van, couple bricks of heroin they claim were under the seat. They've got him in county right now. Transfer papers ready for state. For a second, the floor tipped. No, she said. He's clean. You know he's clean. I know, Sam said. They don't care. They're saying if you keep pushing this, he's going to a place where accidents happen in the showers. She pressed her palms into her eyes until she saw stars. They would kill her brother to keep their story straight. They would do it with forms and signatures and shrugging guards. And then they'd say it was a tragedy, nothing more. While they argued over motions upstairs, a crowd was building miles away. Outside the gray bulk of Red River State Prison, cars and people clogged the entrance road. At the front of the human barricade stood K-Truth, a local rapper with gold teeth and a voice that carried. He was live on Instagram, phone held high. Behind him, construction workers still in their neon vests, grandmothers in house shoes, guys Danielle recognized from old mugshots and new union meetings, men who had been on the other end of Sterling's baton, women who had called her office when nobody else would listen. A white prison transport bus idled 20 yards away. Boxed in, officers inside staring out through glass at a wall of faces. "You see this?" K-Truth shouted into the camera. "They think they can snatch Malcolm King's little brother on some fake dope charge because his sister told the truth in court. Not today. Hey, y'all not disappearing her brother on some fake dope charge today. Not in broad daylight. Not in Georgia." The comments flew up the screen. Screenshots hit Twitter before his stream even finished. News helicopters buzzed overhead, drawn by the mass of people. No one in a uniform wanted to be the first to order a push through a peaceful but immovable crowd on live TV. Back in the courthouse, Danielle sat in the cramped witness room, ankle jiggling, eyes raw. Sam burst in, phone out. "You need to see this," he said. He held it in front of her. The feed buffered, then cleared. K-Truth's face filled the screen, then swung around to show hundreds of people shoulder to shoulder, chanting her name, Malik's name. She saw the bus. She saw the line of troopers unable to move. She saw sunlight glinting off camera lenses, dozens of them. Her throat closed. Tears slid down her face before she could stop them. "They did this," she whispered. "For him. For you," Sam said. For everybody who was tired of getting slapped and told to sit down. She watched a grandmother lift a sign that read simply, "We saw the tape." We're not blind anymore. All the years she had spent trying to reform committees and tweak policies from behind polished wood suddenly felt small compared to that line of bodies out in the heat. Justice doesn't come from a bulletproof office, she realized. It comes from people willing to stand where they can be hit. For the first time, Danielle understood that she wasn't just another piece in the system she'd tried so hard to fix. She was part of something messier and more dangerous, a community that had decided it was done being quiet. On the morning of the verdict, Courtroom 1 felt less like a room and more like a pressure cooker. Every bench was full. Elderly black women in Sunday hats clutched photos of sons and grandsons and husbands who had not walked away from encounters with men in uniform. And a father in a work shirt held a wallet-sized picture between his palms like a prayer card. Reporters lined the walls, cords snaking across the floor, phones already streaming. Outside, the chants leaked in through the thick wood doors. Back the blue on one side, justice for Danielle on the other, two rhythms crashing against each other on the courthouse steps. Danielle sat at the defense table in her white suit, hands folded so tightly her knuckles ached. The scar on her cheek caught the light every time a camera flash popped. Malik sat behind her, eyes fixed on the back of her head, as if he could hold her in place just by looking hard enough. When the clerk announced a new witness for the defense, a murmur rolled through the room. This was supposed to be closing arguments day. Nobody was expecting more. "Call Martha Sterling," Sam said. For a second, Derek thought he had misheard. Then he saw her. His mother walked down the aisle slower than time. She was small, shoulders rounded with age. One hand gripping a worn wooden cane, the other clutching her purse. Her dress was simple, the sort of thing worn to funerals and graduations. Her face was pale under the courtroom lights, but her eyes were clear. "Mom," Derek blurted, half rising. "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. Go home." "Sit down, Derek," she said without looking at him. Her voice cracked across the room like a belt on hardwood. He sat. Under oath, her hands trembled until they folded around each other. "My husband wore that badge for 28 years, she said, staring straight ahead. "He believed it meant you protect the weak. You tell the truth, you come home with clean hands. He died thinking our son was walking in his footsteps." She turned then slowly to look at Derek. "You have shamed his name," she said. "You have shamed mine. I watched you on that television, lying through your teeth, and I thought, no. As that is not how this ends." From her purse, she pulled a small black notebook, the edges frayed, rubber band holding it together. "I am Sambirio." Derek went gray. "Your Honor," Sam said, voice low. This is a personal log Mr. Sterling keeps. He calls it his scorecard. She handed it to the bailiff, who brought it to Sam like it was evidence in a murder trial. Inside, in Derek's own handwriting, were dates and names and little notches of cruelty. 4 grams planted on that loud mouth kid from the corner. Bartender got lippy, shut him up, wiped the tape. Old lady asked for my badge, taught her some manners. The sound in the room changed. No longer a hum, but a growl. The jury did not take long. They filed back in with faces like wet concrete. On the charge of aggravated assault on a peace officer, the foreman said, his voice rough, we find the defendant, Representative Danielle King, not guilty. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the room erupted, and a grandmother let out a wail that sounded like release and mourning tangled together. Malik grabbed Danielle from behind, arms around her shoulders, sobbing into her hair. Strangers hugged each other. Even some of the reporters wiped their eyes. Judge Holloway banged his gavel until his hand shook. He knew the cameras were on him, too. Order, he said, but his voice had lost its edge. He looked at Sterling, then at the notebook on the evidence table, then back to Sterling. Officer Sterling, he said, formal as a funeral. In light of the evidence of perjury, assault, and obstruction presented in this court, I am ordering you taken into custody, pending criminal charges. The bailiffs who had once flanked Derek like honor guards moved behind him and took his wrists. The click of the cuffs was louder than the gavel. His mother turned her face away as they led him out. Processing at Red River was quick. They did not put him in protective custody, whether it was a clerical error or something more deliberate. No one could say. On the form that should have flagged him as former law enforcement, the box was blank. The steel door to B block slid open, and, for the first time since his badge was pinned to his chest, Derek walked into a space he did not control. Eyes followed him from every tier. Men whose cases he had touched, men whose mouths he had split, men whose lives had bent around his reports. For 6 long minutes, the usual noise of the unit died. No shouting, no card games, no TV, just footsteps on concrete and his own breathing too loud in his ears. When the sound finally came back, it was all at once. Officers surged toward the tier, barking orders, batons slamming metal. By the time they reached him near the showers, Derek was curled on his side, arms over his ribs. He would live. The doctors would count fractures and bruises. The papers would call it an incident. Inside, the name The Bull evaporated, replaced by a different kind of silence. Back in Atlanta, Danielle stood on the courthouse steps, blinking against the barrage of flashes. Microphones pushed toward her face. A dozen voices shouted questions about what this meant for police reform, for her career, for her party. Her cheek ached. The scar would always be there now, a thin, pale crescent that makeup could soften but never erase. The part of her that had once believed the system would bend for anyone who played by its rules felt like a shell she had stepped out of. Malik stood at her side, not touching her but close enough that their shoulders almost brushed. He was breathing easier, but his eyes kept scanning the edges of the crowd, watching for uniforms. Someone asked how it felt to win. This is not a win, she said quietly, mostly to herself. This is a start. She did not linger for the cameras. When she broke away, it was toward the sidewalk, as toward the bus stop that would take her back into the neighborhoods that had packed that courtroom with photos and memories. Behind her, a transport van waited by the loading dock. Derek stepped up into it in shackles, head down, flanked by officers who refused to meet his eye. In the end, they both paid. One with broken bones and years in a concrete box. The other with a scar, a cracked faith, and a family that would never again sleep as easy as before. But only one of them walked out of that courthouse with something left of their soul. New Hope Baptist looked different under fluorescent lights than it did on Sunday mornings. The stained glass windows were dark slabs. The pulpit had been pushed back. In its place stood a plastic podium, a couple of microphones, and a hand-lettered banner taped to the wall behind it. Community Town Hall, the Sterling Act. The pews were packed. Grandparents with canes and hearing aids, parents with toddlers asleep on their shoulders, teenagers slouched in hoodies along the sides. Plastic fans bearing funeral home logos fluttered in thick, warm air. Danielle stood at the front, not in her white suit, but in a simple navy dress, sleeves pushed up, a stack of printouts of the new law in front of her. The Sterling Act, she said, does 3 things. It requires every on-duty officer in this state to wear a body camera. It routes all live footage to an independent server the department cannot edit, and it makes it a felony to tamper with or lose that footage. A murmur rippled through the room. Some of the older folks nodded, lips pressed tight. They'd seen too much lost over the years. "It will not bring back anybody we already lost," Danielle continued. "It will not fix everything, but it means next time somebody says the camera malfunctioned, we will have a way to ask, did it or did you?" Hands went up. She took questions about implementation, about budget, and about whether rural counties would have to follow it too. Then an old man near the center aisle pushed himself to his feet. It was Pops. Braves cap pulled low over his brow. He leaned on the back of the pew in front of him while he spoke. "Representative King," he said, "I am glad for these cameras. I am glad you stood up in that courtroom. I truly am." He hesitated, eyes searching her face. "But do you think what happened to that officer was too much? Getting beat up in that prison? He is still a human being, even if he did wrong." The room quieted. A few people shifted, uncomfortable. It was a question more than one of them had had, but no one had said out loud. Danielle rested her hands on the podium. "I am not happy he got hurt," she said, voice steady. "I do not wake up in the morning hoping anybody gets broken ribs, not even a man who put his hand across my face. That is not what I fought for." She let that sit for a moment. But if we are going to talk about what is too much," she went on, "we have to start before he ever walked into that prison. We have to talk about the day he put on that gun and that badge and decided some of us weren't really people, just problems to be handled, files to be closed, bodies to be pushed around." She glanced around at the photos in people's hands, the ones that never made the news. "Justice is not revenge," she said. "It is responsibility. It is the world saying to people with power, you do not get to walk away untouched when you use that power to hurt us." She took a breath. "The truth did not show up on its own in that courtroom," she said. "It did not float down from the ceiling and rescue me. Somebody risked their job to keep a backup copy. Somebody else risked being targeted to post a video. A bunch of you risked your own safety standing in front of a prison bus so they could not disappear my brother. Truth just gives us a chance. And it is up to us whether we are brave enough to grab it." In the front pew, a row of kids sat swinging their legs, whispering to each other. A little girl in pink barrettes stared at Danielle like she was watching TV. Danielle looked right at her. "Do not get it twisted," she said, softening. "You were not born to be victims. You were not born to be hashtags people argue about for 2 days and forget." She pointed gently, not at the girl, but at the whole row of them. "You were born to be witnesses," she said, "to say, I saw what happened, and I will not let you lie about it. You were born to be the ones who keep the cameras on, who keep showing up, who keep standing next to each other when the easy thing would be to go home and pretend you didn't hear nothing." Laughter rumbled quietly. A few people clapped, more in agreement than celebration. Later that night, in her small district office above the beauty supply store, Danielle sat alone. The noise of the town hall had drained away, replaced by the hum of the soda machine in the hallway and an occasional car passing outside. The mural from the church was taped to her bulletin board now, a photograph of it at least. White suit, fist in midair. She barely recognized that version of herself anymore, not because of the punch, but because of what she'd believed before it landed. She used to think the system was a kind of stern parent, flawed, sometimes cruel, but fundamentally correctable if you showed it enough evidence. Now she knew it was something else, a machine that would roll over anything in its path until enough people jammed their bodies into the gears. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. She glanced at it and huffed out a breath. The Sterling Act had just been mentioned on a national show. They had put her picture next to Derek's, side by side, as if their stories balanced each other out. She turned the screen face down. Miles away, as in a 6x8 concrete cell, Derek Sterling watched the same segment on a bolted-down television smeared with fingerprints. "Today in Georgia," the anchor said, "the legislature passed the Sterling Act, a police accountability law named after the ex-officer whose infamous courtroom confrontation sparked nationwide debate." He turned the volume down until the words blurred. They used his name now to label the very thing he had spent a career dodging: oversight, accountability, receipts. No one had come to see him in months. His wife had stopped taking his calls. His mother had sent one letter early on, a short note about weather and the neighbor's dog with a single line at the bottom. I hope you are using this time to think about who you chose to be. He thought about that every night. When the lights went off and the block went loud, he thought about the little black notebook he used to keep, his private scoreboard of domination. At the time, and each line had felt like a joke between him and himself. Showed that kid. Shut that lady up. Reminded that punk who's boss. Now, alone with Cinderblock and his own breathing, each entry replayed like its own tiny verdict. Not the judge's voice or the foreman's. His own handwriting. Coming back to testify against him, he had told the court under oath that he would never hit a woman, that he had a spotless record. It had taken less than 15 minutes of video and one old woman with a cane to strip off every layer of myth he had wrapped around himself. Consequences did not come to punish him. He was starting to realize they came to show him and everyone watching who he had been all along. Back in the district office, Danielle turned off the light and sat in the dark for a moment, listening to the city outside. Sirens in the distance, a motorcycle roaring down the block, someone laughing too loud on the sidewalk. She had learned that consequences do not show up to teach polite little lessons. They arrive to tear off the costumes we put on, to show the world and ourselves exactly who we've turned into. Sometimes the scariest part is not the sentence a judge reads from a sheet of paper. It is the quiet afterward, when you have to live with the echo of choices you once swore no one would ever find out about. Some echoes do not fade. We grow into them. If Danielle's story and the way a single slap turned into a fight for truth and responsibility hit something in you, do not let it stop when the video ends. Like, share, and subscribe so we can keep digging into stories that ask hard questions about power, justice, and who pays the price. And tell us in the comments, when you look at what happened to Danielle and to Sterling, what does real justice look like to you?